If you're watching this video around when it releases, then you're currently more than a year deep into the COVID-19 pandemic. You've gone through quarantines, mask mandates, and lockdowns. It's been a long year, but you're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Vaccination efforts have increased tremendously in the last few months, and slowly but surely, cities are raising their restrictions. Which means you're probably going to start seeing your family again. Maybe you're finally comfortable visiting your grandparents, or your cousins are coming from out of town over the weekend. And if you're a young person living in America, it's pretty likely that some of those relatives are ones you're less than enthusiastic to see. I'm talking about the conspiracy theorists, the party worshippers, and just about every sort of nut job you're embarrassed to be associated with, let alone related to. But you might also ask yourself, have my radical relatives changed since I saw them? It's been a long time in lockdown, so maybe their views have evolved into something more digestible. Maybe the election hit them pretty hard. Who knows? Maybe when you finally see them again, they'll act like entirely different people. Wishful thinking, but the past year hasn't exactly been ordinary. We're here to tell you the answer. And it turns out it may not be what you're expecting. We were curious too, and asked ourselves just how far has the pandemic affected both people's media consumption and their beliefs? Is my uncle chewing up as much as Fox News as he used to? Or has he really changed? We dug into the information surrounding the media during the pandemic, and what we found is about the exact opposite of your hopeful thinking. We found that the pandemic and the media's portrayal of it have resulted in the complete polarization of people's beliefs, fueled by a massive increase in media consumption by the public. Media outlets have used the pandemic as a catalyst to turn what used to be considered public health issues into political opinions. In doing so, the media has created a public that is so detached from one another that they believe in entirely different opinions as facts. Whether it's the effectiveness of masks, the usefulness of quarantines, or the safety of vaccinations, every decision surrounding the pandemic has become a topic of fiery debate in this country.
Whether people did or did not comply with the COVID-19 guidelines indeed depends on where people got their information from, and thus affected the public's understanding of the needed preventative measures. Conservative media was far more likely to downplay the threat of the virus, leading to a greater amount of rejection of preventative measures. So it isn't fair to blame citizens who are consuming news that is telling them that the pandemic is not an urgent issue. The individual is not as culpable for the spread of the virus as the news networks are. It turns out that higher perceived vulnerability to disease and higher scientific literacy were associated with more compliance to the guidelines. On the other hand, exposure to more right-wing news sources, trust and confidence in President Trump and the government's effectiveness, beliefs in conspiracy theories and political lean towards conservatism, and prioritizing economic health were linked to lower odds of doing so. As the pandemic unfolded, individuals turned to news sources to make sense of the unfamiliar and uncertain events. Media's portrayal of the pandemic was most likely to influence the attitudes and perceptions of individuals, and as we have highlighted, they tend to result in complete polarization. So can we really blame these individuals for their lack of scientific literacy, when persuading individuals to adopt scientifically sound beliefs and modify their behavior accordingly is fraught with difficulties, especially as an issue becomes politicized? Indeed, it is politicization that poses a barrier to effective science communication regarding the pandemic. Perhaps a more coherent voice communicating information might have led to more people to understand the urgency of the threat.
Now, you may ask yourself, what can I do about this? Am I going to have to live with the fact that my cousin is a QAnon member for the rest of my life? Or can I change their mind? The answer to this question is the reason we made this video. Young people in this country need to know that their relatives may become more radical than ever before, and they need to know how to nullify the damage and even try to change their views. This is how you go about that. The first step to talking to your radical relatives is being prepared. If you're going to try to convince your family members that what you're saying is based on the facts, you need to be knowledgeable about what you're talking about. Do research. It doesn't have to be a lot, but you need to have the knowledge to back up your debate. Something as simple as a Google search can suffice for some, but feel free to dive deeper if you're more passionate about an issue. Next comes the actual talking part. Now, this may seem daunting at first, considering you're talking to someone about something they vehemently disagree with, but with the right approach, you can get through to even the most stubborn of your relatives. Start by talking about the things you agree about. Even the most polarized people will share opinions on some things, and that's a great place to start. If you can agree on certain topics, your relatives will feel like you're worth listening to. The next best thing to do is approach your relatives with the topics they are the most likely to change their views on. If your relative has an adamant opinion on an issue, move on to the next one. You can always work on that one later, when they've opened up more to what you have to say. Finally, don't be aggressive. But also, don't be afraid to speak up for your beliefs. If all you do is call them names and yell at them, your relatives are likely not going to change a thing. However, if you approach them in the good spirit of discourse, then they're far more likely to hear what you have to say. Now, it's your time to shine. When you meet back up with your extended family this summer, be cautious, but be open to attempting to change their mind. The more people agree with each other in a reasonable way, the better. And if you're successful, tell us about it. Write a comment down below about your experience, or make a post on social media with the tag hashtag radical relatives so we know you came from us. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing what you all have to say.